broadcasting from the studios of NCCI, or the New Covenant Congregation of Israel, in Decatur, Georgia. And on behalf of everyone who assists in the production of Hero Israel, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. My name is Tamara Israel, and I'll be your hostess for today's show. Here with me in the studio is Miss Johanna Israel. Sister,
Shalom.
welcome.
Thank you.
And Miss Marie Israel.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being
Marie
here.
has been a past panelist and here is a guest panelist with us today, and we're very glad to have her back on the set. The title of our show today is Paganism of the Nations. So what we'd like you to do is go and grab your Bible, a pen and paper, and go along with us as we share with you today's topic. The paganism is identified or defined as the state of worshiping false gods or idols. In addition, the delight in sensual pleasures and material goods, or what the scripture calls heathenism. And as you'll notice throughout the scriptures, Yahweh makes a difference between his people and the heathens. Heathens were nations of people who practiced paganism. They worshipped idol gods. So what we'd like to do today is to bring that up into present day to show that the nations are still worshiping gods of wood and stone, of silver and gold, and not the God of the universe, Yahweh, our Elohim. So without further ado, ladies, let's get into paganism. And to start this off, I'd like to get into the scriptures. I'd like to go into Deuteronomy chapter 4, and I'm going to pick this up at, let's see, Deuteronomy chapter 4, and I'm going to pick it up at verse 5. Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as Yahweh my Elohim commanded me, that you should do so in the land where you go to possess. Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what nation is there so great, who has Elohim so near unto them, as Yahweh our Elohim is in all things that we call upon him for? And what nation is there so great that has statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law, which I set before you this day? Only take heed to yourself and keep your soul diligently, lest you forget the things which your eyes have seen, and lest they depart from your heart all the days of your life. But teach them to your sons and your sons' sons. And Yahweh went on to explain that if you do my laws, statutes, and judgments, then I will be a God to you forever, and you will be my people forever. However, if you go and you become like the heathen, I'm going to turn my face from you. And as I always say, that's why we are sitting here in captivity in a strange land today, because our forefathers chose to worship like the nations and not as prescribed by the laws of Yahweh. So here we are. So let's talk about this whole thing, this paganism of the nations. When you think about religion today, it's tied up in ancient mythicism or paganism. Let's talk about the beginning of what we know as Christianity. Let's go back to Catholicism. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, just like you said, when you go back to Catholicism, seeing as to how that is the mother of Protestantism, which is the largest, Christendom is the largest religion on the face of the earth. You really are thinking about all the paganism that exists, because the paganism that exists throughout this entire earth, it stimulates from even just our language. When you think about words like luck, that is something that is so commonly used throughout any conversation. Someone is so quick to wish someone good luck. And what we have to do before we even get into that is think about what luck is. When you do, I looked it up in a dictionary to find it out, and it says that luck equates to a force that brings good fortune or adversity. Now, when you break that down according to its synonyms, it also comes down to a charm, an amulet, and then it goes into conjuration and devil and incantation and so forth. So truly, even when you look around, you look to the actual meanings of the word luck, you're going back to devilish and satanic things. If you pick up on the root word of the word luck, L-U-C, that comes from Lucifer, L-U-C. So you're still dealing with things that are devilish, devil-like, and of Lucifer, the angel of light.
Right.
So even things like this, something as simple as our languages and so forth, come directly from the paganism of the nations. So even before we can even start to try and break ourselves out of all the other pagan rituals, such as the holidays and the traditions and rudiments of men, we have to bring it out of our mouths so that we retain ourselves from saying things like good luck, things of that, things like knock on wood. That's a very common common thing for people to say. What does that mean? You have to think about what these things come from.
Right.
So truly, this is the beginning of the paganism of the nations. But like you said, getting back to the actual Catholicism and so forth, Catholicism and Christianity come directly out of Mithraism.
Right.
Now, Mithraism, a lot of people are not familiar with, but that's the father or the mother, if you will, father and mother of Catholicism and Christianity, because that's exactly where it came from. When you look at the equivalences between the two, you'll think you're looking at the exact same religion, which you truly are. Mithraism is the worship of the sun. It's just as simple as that.
Point blank.
Point blank. Period. It's the worship of the sun. And when you go back to it, again, getting back to Lucifer being that angel of light, that's where it's all coming from, because this whole Mithraism is still dealing with the worship of Lucifer. Now, if you go back and you do a little research on Mithraism, like I said, the Mithraism deals with, if you go back to Constantine. Constantine was a very he promoted Mithraism very much during his lifetime. Okay. As a matter of fact, it wasn't until his deathbed that he even pronounced himself to be, quote unquote, a Christian. And the reason that he chose Christendom as his, because previous to this, everyone in the East and also in the in European nations were pretty much promoting this Mithraism, this sun worship and all that, because there were so many different festivals that were used for it, and people really enjoyed it. The reason he switched it over was simply because of political reasons.
Right.
He felt as though that Christendom could incorporate all those things of Mithraism, all those festivities, in addition to other festivities that were parts of other different religions and so forth. So the choice of Christianity was purely a political choice. And because he made this choice is why people today are called Christians. Had he not made this political choice, people today would still be called Mithra. You know, they'd be worshippers of Mithra, sun god. Okay. But that's where that pretty much comes in. And in a little bit, I'll go back and give some differences between, or actually similarities between Mithraism and Christianity, because there are so many.
Yeah. And that's what people don't understand. After the flood, when Yahweh separated the nations, gave them different languages, they took that the beginning of Lucifer's religion on earth after the flood, which came from Nimrod and his wife and his son, that whole triad, all over, it began to spring up all over the earth in different languages. They gave them different names, but that triad has never changed.
Right.
And as you stated, it went from Babylon into Mithra, which was an Eastern religion. It went into Egypt with the triad there, and now we're seeing it still in Catholicism with this whole Mary, Jesus, and Father God worship. But it's all the same, these triads of gods and these little gods underneath that people don't understand. They're still worshiping today, and hopefully by the time this class is finished, we'll give them some tips to realize when the worship or the service of another god is in place. Because what's so different today is people don't know that they're worshiping these gods. The ancients, those who dealt with Mithra and dealt truly with sun worship, they knew. But today, the people have been deceived. They're still doing the rituals, but they don't know it's two different gods and goddesses. So when you deal with Catholicism, obviously the popes of Rome helped to set up this whole thing. 300 years after the death of Christ and after the death of the apostles, you have what's called Christianity that became Catholicism, which means universal church. So after our people were put into captivity, into Africa in slavery, the rest who were not killed off, obviously, then you began to get this strange religion, something that's totally different from what the scriptures teach, and definitely different than what the apostles in Christ spread, because they didn't do anything different than what their father Yahweh had told them. So we get into a lot of the changes, especially as it relates to the calendar. Let's talk about that a little bit. What happened with the calendar that the Hebrews, who Christ was a Hebrew, the calendar that the Hebrews practiced versus the one that's in place today?
Well, I can speak on the calendar, for instance. Well, as we know, this all came from Rome and the Catholic Church. Basically, what one of the Caesars did was roll back the month from the beginning of the month, which actually started in April, or what's known as Abib in the Hebrew, which is in the spring of the year. He rolled it back to a month that he called January, which actually honored the god Janus. And Janus was a two-faced god that looked into the past and into the future. So, and today we still have customs and traditions that revolve around this whole quote-unquote New Year festivity of looking back into the past and and into the future. So that's one of the main things he did. He actually changed the order of time by starting the month in the dead of the winter as opposed to the spring. He also named the days of the months themselves, beginning with what we call January, which we know is directly involved with the two-faced god Janus, and on to February and March and April and so forth down the line. And just to give you an example, for instance, March was named after the god Mars, I believe, which we also have a planet named after that. And let me see, I'm not sure about April, but I know a lot of the other months do involve pagan deities that we're unaware of today, as well as the days of the weeks. So that's a big influence. We have a picture of Janus that we can show.
Yep, actually they hopefully just saw that picture. And when people go out on December 31st and shoot their guns, they create these dinners, ritualistic dinners, black-eyed peas, certain things you have to have. Ham is usually associated with the worship of Janus as well. As a matter of fact, all the pagan gods, swine was one of their major sacrifices. And you may not find, especially our people, doing chitlins any other time of the year. But Christmas, Easter, New Year's, you find these certain sacrificial meals assigned to these days. So what people don't understand is, even though you may not know anything about Janus, when you create these meals, when you go out at 12 o'clock midnight to celebrate, then you're worshiping Janus. You're serving Janus. These are the services that's involved with these gods. And that's why we're here, to share with you what you're doing and get you to go and do some research on it and then turn around from that. Because what you'll realize is, man, I've been worshiping false gods. And let's talk about the commandments. What does the commandments say about that?
Well, certainly the Ten Commandments give insight. And the very first being that thou shalt have no other gods before me. And thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, Yahweh, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children into the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. So clearly, he says it in the Ten Commandments not to give honor or worship to any pagan deity.
Exactly.
Or not even to create symbols to honor them.
Absolutely.
As well.
And not only that, did the Catholicism and the popes of Rome and the emperors of Rome change these months to sun worship, because we know that's the reason why these months were changed, because Yahweh told us to watch the signs. The seasons changed by the moon, basically. So we would have watched every month. Every new moon was a new month. 12 new moons made up a lunar year. And now everything is based on a solar year, thanks to Julius Caesar. And they have to understand that the ancient nations thought that the sun, since this was the greatest light, that it was what made the grass to grow and their crops to spring up, and obviously made you feel better because you were warm. They thought that was God. And so all of these rituals are based around the sun, because that's the great light. But what we don't understand is, like you mentioned, Lucifer, the name of the devil, it means illuminated one. So his great symbol is the sun, and so therefore everybody's now dealing with sun worship, whether you know it or not. Now in Deuteronomy, I'm going to pick up in Deuteronomy again, chapter 4. I'm going to read a little bit further on here, because these are instructions that Yahweh gave to our people. We didn't follow it then, but he has, even in the days of our captivity, has said to us, wherever you are, if you turn from these things, then I'm going to turn and be your God again. And that's why we continue to say to our people, we've got to turn around from this and begin to worship the true and living Yahweh. Verse 19 says, well, let me pick it up at verse 16. He says, lest you corrupt yourselves and make you a graven image, the similitude of any figure, the likeness of male or female, the likeness of any beast that is on the earth. And when we're finished, we're going to show you lots of male and female deities that is being worshipped today. And different beasts. The likeness of any winged fowl that fly in the air. The likeness of anything that creep on the ground. The likeness of any fish. And we know that fish is a great symbol today. Of anything that is in the waters beneath the earth. And lest you lift up your eyes unto heaven, and when you see the sun and the moon and the stars, even all the host of heaven, should be driven to worship them and serve them, which Yahweh your Elohim has divided unto all nations under the whole heaven. So that's why they're worshiping the sun, the moon, and the stars.
It was
The
destined
major
to them.
religions
Exactly.
have these signs, these sun, moon, and star emblems.
Right.
Look at Islam.
Exactly.
Look at Christianity.
Absolutely. And
So-
when you look at it, like you said, what has happened is they began to worship the creation instead of the
And not the
creator.
creator. Exactly.
And that's the entire problem with all. When you look at any paganistic symbol or anything else, it comes from there.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to get back to as far as we were talking about the Catholicism and Christianity and so forth, and getting back with that whole Mithraism and so forth. See, these are some of the characteristics of the two, which will tell you that it directly comes back from this. First of all, it says Mithra, which was born of a virgin, and this virgin was given the title Mother of God, which is where we get all this Mary worship coming from.
Right.
Because this still is the connection. What has happened throughout the years has always been the same. Just like I said before, from the Babylonian time to the Egyptian time to the Grecian time to the Roman time, and now the revived Roman Empire still deals with the exact same gods, just renaming them. That's why we're dealing with the Mother of God today.
Right.
This Virgin Mother was also considered immaculate, without stain of sin, just like, and this is speaking not of today's, but of then. Sundays were held sacred, just like today. We know that when you read the scriptures, the seventh day of the week is when Yahweh set aside to be the holy convocation day. Today, the day set aside for him, the Sabbath, not the first day of the week. And then, as far as it said, there's a radiating crown designed to represent the golden sun disk sacred to Mithra. Even today, we see these places of worship with the sun disks around the heads of quote-unquote holy people in what they call halos.
Right.
When you look at the scriptures, and here's a graphic when they get an opportunity, when you read the scriptures, you won't find the word halo in the scriptures. So why is halo throughout Christianity? Everyone, whenever you see, particularly on this particular graphic, you'll see whenever they're particularly for the nativity scenes, you will always see those halos around those quote unquote holy people.
Right. Right.
And I think my sister has spoken before, said that if Christ had a halo on his head, there'd be no reason to hide him.
Right.
You'd been very easy to find him at all points in time. Same thing with all the holy men.
Exactly.
There was
why sun images?
Exactly,
You know?
exactly, because it goes right back to Mithra and goes back to all of the other ancient deities and so forth, the sun gods.
Exactly.
And it also speaks on this one. It says a handshake was developed by those who worshipped Mithra as a token of, as a gesture to show you were unarmed. And it said for Catholicism, there's also a particular handshake that they use accompanying by the words "Peace be with you." So this was something else that was kind of carried over from there. There's a couple more. Mithra was a chaste god and was known for celibacy, which is why in the Catholicism religion, the priests are celibate. They're supposedly celibate. We know that that's not the case, but they're supposedly celibate. So that's where this comes from. It doesn't come from the scriptures. The scriptures do not say that the priests have to be celibate. So this is why when you look at these things, we can't just accept them as they are. You have to look, and it's not in the scriptures, so it came from someplace. It came from paganism. Exactly.
Okay.
Another point in this was in the Catholic religion, the priests are known as fathers. Now, Yahweh himself told us that we are not to deal with calling any man father, not to give that type of reverence to any man. But yet and still, in the Catholicism religion, the priests are known as father. And this is totally against the proper things.
Okay.
And then the greatest festival of the Mithraic calendar, and also the greatest festival of the Christian calendar, is December 25th, which is the day that they claim that the Messiah was born on, but we know we follow the scriptures. He was born in the summertime, not in the wintertime. But this is the day that Mithra was born on.
Exactly.
Supposedly the birth of the sun, birthday of the sun.
Absolutely.
S-U-N, not S-O-N.
Absolutely. So when we go back and look at these things, we see that Christianity is nothing but a new form, turning over the same leaf of the exact same paganism and the exact same sun worship that was always there.
Exactly. Well, one thing I would like to touch on, like you said, it was a political move because at that time it was easy. They found it an easy transition to convert people who were, I guess, Mithra devotees, to this new religion, quote-unquote religion called Christianity, they really did not have to change their ways.
Right.
They could keep doing the same customs and same sun-worshiping traditions as they had always done.
Right.
So it was an easy transition. It was a smooth one, too.
Right. Yes.
And when you look these things up in an encyclopedia or even on the internet, it'll tell you that paganism married this whole Christianity thing. It was a
Exactly.
marriage between the two. The pagans, it was easy because they didn't have to stop any of those old pagan rituals. They're just now calling them by Christian names.
Exactly.
You know, like you said, now December 25th is now the birthday of the S-O-N and not what they used to
Exactly.
call it, the S-U-N.
Exactly.
So nothing changed except the names around this stuff. Let's talk a little bit about the days of the week. We just had a picture up. Hopefully we can bring that up again. Because in Deuteronomy, I read where Yahweh said that he gave to the nations the day, the sun, the moon, and the stars to worship. Well, some of the days of the week are about the planets, basically,
yes.
most of them. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, I'd like to touch on the main day, I'd like to say, what we call Sunday. And it truly, the name itself denotes what it's about. It's about worshiping the sun. And of course, that comes right from Mithraism and what we just talked about. And I'd like to read something regarding this day. It should be brief. The first day of the week, Sunday, since ancient times has been designated the day of rest. For Christians, it is, the holy day of the week due to the fact that Christ was reported to have risen from the dead upon this day. Yet the name of Sunday has nothing to do with Christianity, but everything to do with even more ancient religions. The ancient Greeks knew that the sun was the source of life on the planet, and they gave it prime importance in their thinking. When the Romans later adopted the 7-day week, they emphasized their respect for the sun by naming the first day of the week for it, Dies Solis, the day of the sun. The day of the sun. So it clearly points out that this is something they intended to do because of their worship of the sun. And as well, all of the days of the week are named after pagan gods. Of course, Sunday was named after the sun god. They turned around and put a day to Monday, which is to the worship of the moon god as well. And these are all pagan days. For instance, Tuesday, I'm just going to briefly go through these. Wednesday, what did I say? Tuesday, I don't have that one here for some reason.
Chu. It was an old ancient god called Chu.
Okay.
Or if you look at in terms of the planets, Tuesday was the day of Mars, you know. So,
Okay.
and then Mercury was Wednesday. of
Right,
course.
that was named after a Norse god, Odin.
Yeah.
But of course, it all goes back to, in the Roman times, I think it was Mercury that,
How about Thursday?
oh, okay, exactly. Thursday has to do with the ancient god of thunder, Thor, who was back in the Roman times, I believe, also. And also it has was called the Norse god of thunder. I'm not sure where that came in at, but originally it was truly for Thor. Was
I
a
remember
mythological-
cartoons for that. The Mighty Thor and all that kind of stuff.
Now
Yeah.
this is interesting. Friday is considered a lucky day, okay? And it's, of course, one of the most popular days of the week because we consider it to be the end of the work week. And this god was named after, it's a Norse god named Frigga, a goddess, I should say. And she was the wife of Odin. And, of course, in the Roman times, the goddess was Venus, I believe, which was the goddess of beauty.
Okay.
So-
and then finally, they took the Sabbath day,
Exactly.
which is the 7th day of the week. And what did they call that?
Well, they named it after Saturn, the god of harvest, I believe, in the Roman times. And truly, it is what we consider to be the Sabbath day. And just to point out that all of the names of the days of the week have pagan names put to them, but in the scriptures, you'll see that the Most High, Yahweh, he named the days after the number of the day. For instance, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7. He didn't put a name to the days of the week. So this is clearly man's doing.
Absolutely.
And just evidence of, his worship of the nations, paganism.
Okay. Let me go ahead and take time to invite our audience out to the New Covenant Congregation of Israel. We are located in Decatur, Georgia at 3901A Covington Highway. That's 3901A Covington Highway, Indicator, Georgia 30032. Our phone number is 404-286-5869, and you can reach us on our website. It's located at www.thencci.com. Again, that's www.thencci.com. Feel free to call us or join us for any of our classes. We have our Sabbath service at 1 o'clock on the Sabbath day, which is now called Saturday. Also, we have a pre-Sabbath class starting at 11 o'clock. On the first day of the week, we have a prophecy class at 10:30 a.m. On the third day of the week, which is now called Tuesday, we have a history class that starts at 8 o'clock. And then on the fifth day of the week, there is a Sisters Only Bible class that starts at 8 o'clock. And again, that's called Thursday today. So again, what we try to do is make you know that these are pagan names that we're calling on, because Yahweh said it's the first day through the seventh day, just like it was the first month through the 12th month. So again, it was the nations that named them after their pagan gods and goddesses. We're going to break for our news report, and we will be back shortly. Ladies, be right back.
Okay.
I was looking at the wrong camera.
Hero Israel.
I kept looking at that.
Paganism of the Nations, Part 2.
You're looking at this.
According to the Merriam-Webster Collegiate Dictionary, 10th edition, the definition of a pagan is the follower of a polytheistic religion, which is the belief in more than one God, one who has little or no religion and delights in sensual pleasures and material goods, making paganism the quality or state of being a pagan. Take a deep breath. Can you smell it in the air? Well, once you filter out the recession, the slump of the stock market, the increase of unemployment, and its effect, homelessness, what do you smell? Yes, it's war. Wars and rumors of war. The scent perfumes from Capitol Hill and pervades through the entire world as we know it. The name Capitol Hill comes from Capitoline Hill, established in Rome with a structure parallel to that of Capitol Hill. Capitoline Hill was also known as Mars Hill. Mars, which is also the name of one of our planets named by the Euro-Gentiles, but Mars is also the Roman pagan god of war. You do the math. One nation under God, indivisible, yet as it is written in the AJC, a federal appeals court on the fourth day of the week, now known today as Wednesday, named after the chief god in Norse mythology named Woden, the court rejected a plan to display the Ten Commandments on a granite monument near the Capitol in Frankfort, Kentucky, calling it a thinly disguised effort at government endorsement of religion. In the words of Cujo Goody concerning the Ten Commandments, what's wrong with them? And they say, God bless America. When you consider paganism, not only the worship of more than one God comes to mind, but also the worship of Satan himself through divination. Pharaoh in Egypt not only believed himself to be a god, but worshiped Ra the bull, aka the sun god, Horus, Osiris, etc. But he had also had his own confidential magicians. Magicians were also known for their concocting potions and spells for any and every purpose. Today, these magicians are known as doctors. The potions and spells are known as pharmaceuticals or drugs. The latest street drug on the scene is called ecstasy, short for methylenedidoxymethamphetamine. Similar to LSD and angel dust in the 60s, first found a following in white middle-class suburbs. But today it can be found in black communities, inner cities, and rural southern towns. At $25 a pill, it produces a high that lasts approximately 4 to 6 hours. Marketed as the hug drug or love drug, it is said to make the user feel good about everyone and anything. Sounds to me like love potion number 9. But the side effects are much worse than the hype, as usual. It has been known to lead to seizures, strokes, dehydration, nausea, cold sweats, chills, hallucinations, tremors, double vision, muscle cramps. It has also been found to increase body temperature as high as 105 to 117 degrees, and even death. My folks are not creating these magical potions, but we are rapidly dying from the paganism of the nations. Once again, for all current and future news, reference the Bible and secular history. This has been Ariel Ben Yisrael in the news on Hero Israel. Back to the studio.
Welcome back to Hear, O Israel, in our show entitled Paganism of the Nations. Marie, we left off talking about the days of the week, especially this whole switch between Saturday and Sunday. Tell us a little bit more about the day called Saturday, which we know is the Sabbath.
Well, yes, I wanted to finish up by just pointing out that Saturday is the seventh day of the week, or considered the seventh day of the week. And it says here that such was the day upon which the Hebrew God commanded his people to rest. Through our modern age, Jews kept Saturday holy as the Sabbath, which is quite a contrast to Roman practices. And understanding that Rome set all this up through the Catholic Church, and we mentioned the Emperor Constantine, who actually was responsible for adopting Christianity as the legal religion of Rome, and that all this that we recognize today as Christian, whether it be Methodist, Baptist, or whatever of the 500 or so denominations you want to choose, all of it stems from Catholicism.
Correct.
It's all Catholicism.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if we can show that picture or if it has been shown of the Emperor Constantine, who was responsible for changing the day.
And listen to this. This comes from a paper by Dr. Edward T. Hiscox from 1893, as a matter of fact. It says, Sunday did come into early Christian history as a religious day, as we learned from the Christian fathers and other sources. But what a pity that it came branded with the mark of paganism and Christian with the name of the sun god, Dies Solis, then adopted and sanctified by Constantine in the papal apostasy and bequeathed to be a sacred legacy to Protestantism. So as you can see, Constantine, who was the one responsible for changing, saying, we will no longer Judaize. See, it was no more good for them to do as the Hebrews did and as Christ did, which Christianity is supposed to be Christ-like. And they said, no, we don't want to do anything those Jews are doing. So they're worshiping on the Sabbath. We're going to worship on the day of the sun, because Constantine was a Mithraic follower. He was an apostle of Mithra. So they followed the day of the sun, called Dies Solis. So that's why we have these changes today. And as you march into your Christian church on the day of the sun, you need to think about these things, because truly, who is your God? Is it the sun god? Then it's Lucifer.
Right.
It's not Yahweh. Because
Absolutely.
if you were worshiping Yahweh, you would be serving him on the day that he said, which is what? The fourth commandment says, keep the Sabbath.
That's right.
Honor it and keep it holy. That's the day that you're to go to church and to worship and read out of the book of the law and the prophets. And so therefore the whole world is deceived, because most religions keep Sunday, or the day of the sun, as their religious day.
Exactly.
Right.
All right, let's talk a little bit about these monuments and symbols of this whole thing called sun worship, because as we've already showed our audience, it's quite connected. Sun worship is Christianity.
Right.
So now let's show them by these signs and symbols so that they can recognize it for themselves.
Right. Just like you stated, Christianity is sun worship, but just like so many of these other polytheistic religions that came before Christianity, it has the main god, which is the sun god, but it has a lot of tributary gods, a lot of little gods under there.
And goddesses.
And goddesses, exactly. And an example of one of those goddesses would be Goddess Diana. And this goddess Diana you can find her in the scriptures, during our Hebrew times.
Right.
If you go to Acts, as a matter of fact, the letters speak on particular Diana. Now Diana, we're going to go to Acts, and I think it's in 19. Diana they built an entire shrine to her. She was so important because previously she was known as Isis, because remember that all they do is change the names.
Right.
She's known as Isis. She was also known as other names also. But this particular one, I'll read this about it. She was so important that they actually created one of the 7 wonders of the world.
Right.
That was her her shrine that they set up to her. That was so important to them. Let me read that. Acts 19, and I'll pick it up at verse 24, and I'll skip around. For a certain man named Demetrius, a silversmith, which made silver shrines for Diana, also called as Artemis, brought in small gain into the craftsmen. I'll skip down a little further into 27. So that not only this our craft is in danger to be set at naught, but also that the temple of the great goddess Diana should be despised. This temple is one of those great 7 wonders of the world. And her magnificence should be destroyed, whom all of Asia and the world worships. Exactly. Verse 28. And when they heard these things, they were full of wrath and cried out, saying, Great is Diana of the Ephesians. So important to them. I'll skip down a little further. And it says, verse 35, and when the town clerk had appeased the people, he said, You men of Ephesus, what man is there that knoweth not that the city of the Ephesians is a worshipper of the great goddess Diana, and of the image which fell down from Jupiter? Jupiter, again, one of their main gods that they're speaking of, and also Jupiter being that, remember, Jupiter is the name of the largest heavenly body that's known to the solar system. So all of these things, he was the great God, exactly. He was their version of Zeus.
Right.
So all of these things, nothing has changed. Now, all these things were written about in the scriptures at this time, and they're still taking place today because, again, this particular edifice that was created is so important then. It's so important today because it's still considered one of the 7 wonders of the world. As a matter of fact, when you go and do some research on this goddess Diana, you'll find that she's the Mother Earth. She's known as the Mother Earth and that Mother Nature. You always hear about, they always want to tell children, Mother Nature this, and this is where this Mother Nature comes from. She is that great goddess Diana that they spoke of at that time.
Also called the Queen of Heaven.
Also called the Queen of Heaven, where we know we have scriptures also dealing with that, where they baked cakes to the queens of heaven. Exactly, because that still goes back to the goddess when the hot crossover buns that they did this, and they spoke of that also back in Jeremiah's time in the 44th chapter and so forth. They spoke on that. So we are still doing these things today during that Easter period and so forth. So nothing has changed. I wanted to read a little bit here. This says this is a little bit about this this great goddess Artemis or Diana. It says, I am the mother without spouse, the original mother. All are my children, and therefore none has ever dared to approach me. The imprudent one who attempts it shames the mother. That is the reason for the curse. So these are things that they believe about this goddess that are still held high, because this goddess, this Mother Nature, is in fact present day that Mother Mary. So nothing has changed except the years.
I was going to ask you also, isn't she tied up with Astra, or?
No doubt, because that's where the cakes of heaven and so forth. Matter of fact, we can go to Easter. We can go back to that in Jeremiah and pick that up a little bit if you desire.
And while you're doing that, we have another picture that we'd like to pull up. And this is the picture of Isis. And all these goddesses were associated with fertility. And that's why when you saw the picture of Diana's, there were paps or breasts all over her body, because they are associated with fertility and with sex rights. So with this one, with Isis, she also is seen holding a baby to her breast. And this is the same picture that you would see today of Mary holding a so-called Jesus to her breast. All the same kinds of deities, female deities, the major female deity, which is nothing but paganism. And we know today that the Catholics still enshrine Mary. I mean, Mary and her so-called baby boy. It's as if the man never grew up. You know?
And we were talking about Jeremiah. I'm picking up in chapter 7 and verse 18. And it says, the children gather wood, and the fathers kindle fire, and the women knead their dough to make cakes to the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto other gods, that they may provoke Yahweh to anger. So these are the things that this is our people doing. This is the time of Jeremiah. So we were even doing these types of things at that time. And again, just like my sister stated, this is Astaroth. This is the god. This is their god of the Easter and so forth. That's being dealt with in the hot cross buns and those kind of things. So we've always been about these things. As a matter of fact, if we even go back into the times of Solomon, Solomon was he was doing things for this same god, Astaroth. We can go back into that, and I think it's in 1 Kings. In 1 Kings, we could pick it up, verse 11. And this is in chapter 11, chapter 11, 1 Kings. And we could pick it up at verse 3. And this is after we know that Solomon was one of the wisest. He was the wisest man on earth until he fell, until he got old. In verse 3, it says, and he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. Verse 5, for Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Zidonians, and Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. And Solomon did evil in the sight of Yahweh, and went not fully after Yahweh, as did Dawid his father. Then did Solomon build high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, and the hill that is before Jerusalem, and so forth and so on. So these high places, which we're about to get into, were in fact those obelisks that we still have today. Which one of the most famous ones that here in America we know of is what? The Washington Monument.
That's right.
And here's the graphic for that. And it's in addition to it being a phallic symbol and showing these high places that were spoken of back in the scriptures, you also see there the sunburst. So bringing out even more of that paganism symbols. In addition to the Statue of Liberty, her base is a sun starburst.
So what one must ask themselves, what does this standing image have to do with religion? Is it present in today's churches?
Absolutely.
So let's deal with the
yes.
history of these phallic symbols, since we brought that up. And again, you see the sunburst, which is the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty. And that too is positioned to receive the direct angles of the sun. Now in ancient Egypt, the pyramids were built in direct angle of the sun. And as a matter of fact, they called them the staircase to the sun. And the Egyptians worshipped the sun as well. Listen to this. This is from Mysteries of Egypt. And it says, the code of the sun was maintained by the Egyptian kings over the centuries. They built pyramids, which were symbols of the stairway to the sun or the angled rays of the sun, and solar temples in honor of the sun gods. Now today, churches are also solar temples. And that's what we've got to get the people to understand. So let's talk about some of these churches today and show these monuments as they really are, temples to the sun, and not to the S-O-N, but to the S-U-N.
Absolutely.
So first of all, we've got to show this temple, this so-called church, or the pyramid shape. While I'm doing that, why don't one of you all go ahead and get into this whole phallic symbol thing while I find this picture of church.
Okay, well, while you do that, this right here is, as far as the actual pagan symbols, it's called a phallic symbol, it's an obelisk. And as the scriptures refer to it, it's called as a high place. And these high places, like we stated, are exactly the monuments as in the Washington Monument. These monuments you'll find initially in Egypt. These things were so very important to these pagans and present day, because in present day pagans, that these actual obelisks were not only replicated as in the case of the Washington Monument, they were actually dug up from Egypt in such locations and then transplanted and re-erected. And notice how the term re-erected, because it is a phallic symbol. It's a male organ. So it was re-erected in other locations throughout the world. Some of the, as a matter of fact, here's a graphic you can pick up. These are some of the actual original phallic symbols or obelisks that have been re-erected throughout the world. Most of them are in Europe. There are just a few still in Egypt. And there's one here in America. The one that's in America is in Central Park in New York City.
Exactly.
Now that one went through several moves. It went from Egypt to Europe, and then from Europe it was brought over here. So it went through various, that'll tell you just how important this is. This right here is a graphic that's showing that it was originally, it was taken by train and so forth to Europe, and then it was taken on a boat. They had to erect a special boat and open up a space in the hull of the boat to be able to place it in there, because these things are solid granite. I mean, you're talking tons and hundreds of tons of weight to bring it over here to America to place it in Central Park. That'll show the significance of this pagan symbol. I mean, this satanic pagan symbol, just to erect it. And at the bottom of the screen, you'll be able to see a picture of what it looks like today in Central Park as it is sitting there. So when you look at the backdrop of Central Park, there are the park benches and so forth, then you'll see that obelisk sitting right there as its symbol of its satanic symbol for everyone to see.
And then what we have to ask ourselves is this: okay, why would the Europeans take such time to dismantle these erected phallic symbols from Egypt, which we know were symbols to their sun god, and place them all over the world? Unless they worship the sun.
Absolutely.
These are still tied, connected to the temples today or churches today. Even the pyramid shape of the churches today is still very symbolic of sun worship. Now, today, these phallic symbols, they had a little twist to it. Got a little turn. Let's talk about a little turn in terms of a steeple today.
Well, I tell you this. If you look at the modern day churches, you'll see something, and this is a fairly modern-day invention. It's called the steeple. There are companies that actually make steeples to put on tops of quote-unquote churches. And if you can pick up that graphic there, you'll see a phallic-type symbol with a cross at the very top, which is also another pagan symbol that we haven't touched on. Crosses come from the Egyptian Ankh, which is their symbol of life. The cross is a direct adaptation of the Ankh. And you can see there where, once again, you have two steeples with crosses on the top of them. That depicts sun worship in all its entirety, as far as I'm concerned. Just to touch on, too, the obliques that existed back in the Egyptian days, I wanted to point out that a lot of those obliques had inscriptions. And just to give you an idea of what the inscription said, let me see. Okay, it says generally obliques have inscriptions on all four sides, and also parts of the pyridium, are sometimes carved with the bas reliefs. These monumentae, symbolize the stability and creative force held by the solar god Ra. The Egyptians believed that the solar rays brought a great vivifying power even into the grave, which would have an effect on the subsequent resurrection of the deceased. So certainly their intention was to reincarnate, exactly. Bring back life from the dead. Also, too, when you look at, for instance, a lot of these have been erected all over the world, as she said, and a lot of the ancient buildings just tell the story, but even the more modern-day buildings, such as churches, will also tell the same story of paganism. And just to give an example of here in Atlanta even, you have an oblique that's right down there at the King's Center. As a matter of fact, King's Chapel on the campus of Morehouse College. If you ever have an occasion to go down there, you will see a miniature oblique symbol. And once again, I don't know who erected that particular one, but it's all in line with paganism.
And you
all
know,
over the world.
right along with those steeples, if you go back in the history and check those steeples, you've always, particularly in the olden times, they had bells inside those steeples.
Okay.
Those bells were always rung. Now, if you go back again and follow the language patterns, Bel comes from Baal. Baal comes from Baal. Beelzebub was the name for Satan also.
Okay.
So they,
Wow.
exactly, the sun god. So Beelzebub. So they were ringing in the bells. They were calling on Satan.
Calling their God.
Exactly, calling on Satan. So within this steeple, within this phallic symbol, which we know is the male organ, they were also calling upon their God, calling upon Satan. So this is where these, because again, you won't see bells and so forth in the scriptures. We always have to think past what is standard.
Right.
There has to be a reason. More than likely, that reason is pagan.
Right.
You'll always find it.
As a
Now,
matter
we just talked about the fact that today's steeple was yesterday's phallic symbol or
Right.
male organ, erected male organ. They just showed a picture of a church in Germany, and that picture was taken on what's called National AIDS Day, which is December 1st all over the world. And on December 1st, at this particular church in Germany, they made a huge condom and placed it over that steeple to symbolize the fact that, because of AIDS, you need to wear condoms.
Right.
But it just helps to make the fact that these steeples were yesterday's phallic symbols.
Right.
And that's why it has a giant condom over this steeple in front of this church.
Right.
So, come on now.
Yeah,
If the
exactly.
Egyptians' empire fell, and they're still trying to figure out how the Egyptians did the things they did.
Right.
If it fell because of sun worship. It fell because of worship of all these pluralistic gods and not the worship of Yahweh the Most High. What makes the Europeans think that their kingdom is going to stand?
Right.
It's not. And Yahweh's promised that he's going to famish all the nations because of their paganism. But to even go a little bit closer to home, because again, I don't care whether you're Protestant or Catholic, everybody's in love with the Pope.
Right.
They're in love with what the Pope is doing. But we can show you different things inside the Vatican itself, because what you got to understand is the Vatican City, right in the middle of Vatican City is a phallic symbol.
Right.
And here it is. This is a picture of Vatican City, and right there, dead smack in the middle, is a phallic symbol.
Right.
Why did they take it from Egypt, re-erect it in front of the biggest, largest Christian church in the world today? If that doesn't tell you something's wrong, then you will never believe anything we're saying.
Right. They had to bring their God from there and bring their God close to them.
Right.
So that their God would be right there, just like all the other pagan peoples that we read about in the scriptures. They always had to keep their gods close by.
Exactly.
And that's how when Yahweh told us, we wouldn't have any form or semblance to bring with us.
Exactly.
Except for his righteous ways. That would be all that we have, is his righteous ways.
Because if you remember back in the Old Testament, whenever there was an altar built to Yahweh, it could not be hewn. It had to be, couldn't be hewn of stone. It had to be just
right. As it was.
untouched, as
Right.
it was.
Otherwise, we would fall
Because it
down
would
the
have
road.
become an image
Absolutely.
at that point.
Absolutely.
And there were strict commands given in the Old Testament regarding that. So you're exactly right.
Not only that, throughout the Vatican, there are many, of course, idols and images. I mean, the second commandment is totally disregarded by the Vatican, by
Right.
the Christian church, because of the idols and images, that you can even today see the Pope going to different images of Mary and literally bowing down in front of these images, not to mention the images of Christ, or so-called Christ,
Right.
who's nothing but their god Zeus or Jupiter. But here you have an image of that was Jupiter in the Pantheon in Rome, and after the conversion to so-called Christianity, they took this image and they brought it into the Vatican, and you can see the ray of light coming in to lighten this so-called pagan deity, whom they are now calling Peter. And there you have the sun wheel on the top of this image, which is also that halo type effect. But this is all right in the Vatican City. People, millions of people come through to kiss the feet of this image every single day, which is unfortunate because they don't realize it's a pagan god.
Right.
It once was a pagan god.
Right.
And that stream of light comes through this huge round circular dome, which today many churches are being patterned after the circular dome with the opening for the sun to come in. So that's how that stream of light is coming down, reflecting on that image. People never think about these things, but go and look at your church. See, don't you see a pyramid shape, the steeple or the phallic symbol, a round circle, which is that all-seeing eye of Horus,
Right.
and some sort of image with halos.
Right.
We're going to wrap it up for today. We're going to continue this show, so stay tuned for part 2.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Israel show. We are speaking of the paganism of the nations. This is part 2. Now, there's a lot of paganism that's been going on from a long time. Man is still worshiping gods and goddesses which cannot save or give life. Now, Easter is said to be by man the day of the resurrection of the Messiah. But what does the Easter bunny or the Easter eggs has to do with the resurrection of the Messiah? Please, ask your preacher and ask yourself this. What does it have to do with the resurrection? Now, in 1 Samuel chapter 7, verse 3, there's a goddess called Astaroth, who is the goddess of fertility and sexual love. Now, the animal, the rabbit, is also known as a very fertile animal. Now, there's a lot of nations out there that has certain animals representing their gods. Easter bunny, Easter eggs. Christmas Day is also another paganism day. The Messiah wasn't born on the 25th of December. If you check out the Greek calendar and the Hebrew calendar, in St. Luke chapter 1, it is written that the angel Gabriel overshadowed Mary, and she received a child, the Messiah, Yeshua. It was in the 6th month. So if you go into the calendars and search out the 6th month in the Hebrew calendar, the 1st month is April, the 6th month is September. Count to 9 months, it passed December. In the Greek calendar, January. Count the 6 months, June. Count 9 months from June, past December. So there's a lot of things that men do, and they're worshiping gods and goddesses, like I said before, which cannot save or give life. Now, if you read in Matthew 15, verse 1 through 9, verse 9 saying, "But in vain they worship me, teaching for the doctrine the commandments of men." We can't worship the true and living God and man. Read Matthew chapter 6, verse 24. This has been your Hero Israel show, Paganism of the Nations, Part 2. Elijah Ben Israel, your final commentary. Peace.
And we'll see you next week.
You love me night, I love you new.